So we're going to talk about data security challenges in the cloud, and there is a lot of, I would say there is a lot of scrutiny nowadays as well about the security controls, making sure that you have the right controls in place, because this topic has actually come up a lot recently in the headlines due to data breaches which have taken place, where regulators have later found that there were inadequate security measures in place, and as a result, the company who was responsible for that had been sanctioned. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So in relation to security challenges in the cloud, I think one of the one of the points to bear in mind as well is the fact that this is not a topic that's going to go away anytime soon, and on the contrary, it's a topic which is more and more important nowadays, especially since everyone is working from home. We have remote work, and this means that a lot of companies are turning towards the cloud for virtually everything, right? Zoom is using the cloud, storage on the cloud, even word processing with Office and so forth also on the cloud. And this means as well that if you don't look at security now, then you are at risk, I would say, of facing the next data breach. And there are a few challenges, I would say, in relation to the cloud, and I think it's important to first understand the different challenges so that you are able to understand how to best approach those. And the first challenge, I would say, is lack of visibility. So there is, for example, a report by Dimension Research, and they found that 87% of the respondents agree that the lack of cloud visibility obscures security threats to their organization. And this is something that I'm sure many people can easily relate to, right? You have the cloud, which is something that you can't really see. It's something which is intangible. You just shift a lot of things towards the cloud. And because it's not something that you have direct control over, well, lots of people just assume that, oh, you know what, I don't really have to worry about security because it's going to be handled by whoever is handling the cloud service. Therefore, in addition to outsourcing the hosting, the service itself, you also thinking that the security risk is also being outsourced to that vendor. But then this is not actually the right approach. The right approach would be to see that even though you may not be hosting the data yourself, even though it's being hosted by a third-party service provider, well, you still need to be able to ensure that you know what's going on, that you still have some that you still look and consider as well the different security controls which are in place. And whether you are in a public or hybrid cloud environment, you always need to ensure that you still have visibility and control over the data that you have on the cloud. And if you don't have any administration or management capability for the server hosting your data, then you are going to have issues concerning security, but also data privacy, because you have in a number of jurisdictions, you actually have laws which require organizations to keep the data that they hold secure and confidential from other unauthorized users, and so this is one of the this is the first challenge, I would say, that you would have to face. Sorry, I forgot to move the slide. A second challenge that I want to talk about is insecure APIs, because whenever you move towards the cloud, well, because it's the whole platform is being managed by a third-party vendor, it means that in many cases, well, you have to rely on APIs. APIs, as a reminder, are application programming interfaces, and the cloud service providers, they would typically offer a wide range of APIs to the customers to manage and to monitor the cloud services. But then if the APIs are broken or if they are exposed, then it could potentially lead to data breaches, and that of course is an issue. And therefore, it's always important as well for you to check how you approach API security. The third point, and that's what I've been mentioning a lot actually, data breaches, because a data breach is actually one of the, from a legal perspective, it's actually one of the main factors how a regulator would start to investigate and to and look into your data practices. Because, well, let's face it, regulators, they have lots of different challenges in terms of internal staffing, investigations, and so forth, and they're not going to knock at the door every single company and check, have you implemented proper security and so forth. That's highly unlikely. The reason how regulators start to investigate an organization is because that organization somehow managed to get the spotlight. For example, was there a whistleblower which went to the media and reported certain security deficiencies? Or otherwise, is there a data breach which took place and the data of a lot of customers have potentially been exposed? Or otherwise, has a customer complained to the regulator about the data being leaked or otherwise accessed by a third party? So those are the main reasons why a regulator would then start looking into the security practice of an organization. On average, a data breach incident is, as you can imagine, it's very expensive. It costs companies about $2 million per breach, according to different surveys. And the reason for this high cost is that, well, you have, whenever data breach takes place, you have lots of different things which come into play. For example, in the investigation, the forensics, and so forth. So lots of different experts which need to come in to try to remediate the incident, try to fix it. And then you also have in a number of jurisdictions as well, organizations have certain obligations. For example, they have the obligation to notify the impacted customers. In some cases, there is also the obligation to cover, for example, for customers to be able to have certain credit reports and so forth. And obviously, all of these different elements have a price tag attached to it. So that's the reason why the cost of a data breach can be quite expensive. And data breach, there have been actually a number of data breach incidents which were the result of poor key management, weak passwords, lack security authentication. There was, for example, a large tech company that that is very popular. That is, yeah, it's a well-known name in the public, and that company, I'm not going to give any names on purpose, because it's not the goal is not to shame anyone now, but it's just to as an illustration. And that company had a data incident, and what happened was that there was an engineer in a product team that as many tech companies do, they would host certain open source code, or they would host certain things on GitHub or on other platforms. And what happened was that there was a mistake done, and the engineer actually included in the GitHub posting the password and the login to access the company's platform, and this resulted, of course, in a security incident, because there were unauthorized persons who then used that login and password to access the platform. And this actually happens. This actually happens quite a lot as well. Or otherwise, developers would be leaving encryption keys within the codes that hackers can access, or otherwise not securing properly the web portal. there have actually been surprisingly quite a few incidents recently, for example, in the UK and in France, where data regulators have issued sanctions against companies because on the client portal, once a user is logged into the platform, what happened was that there was no further authentication ever conducted, and what some users did was that they simply changed the end of the URL address so that they could access different pages, and in some cases they were even able to access information relating to other users simply by changing the last few digits of the URL. Obviously, that's when this was discovered, the regulators were not too happy about it, and there were a number of sanctions issued in those cases in the UK and particularly in France. So this is something which that does come up a lot, unfortunately. The next challenge that I want to talk about will be regulatory compliance complexity. This is something which is very important for most organizations, because all organizations, I'm sure, are aware that a number of jurisdictions have a lot of different data protection or security laws, and in many cases, those laws actually do require the organizations to keep the information confidential and secure. And in specific sectors, for example, in finance, in banking, in healthcare, where the data is highly sensitive, there have been additional requirements which have been imposed by local laws. And in many cases, this means that simply using the default security and compliance controls provided by cloud platforms would not be sufficient in order to meet those enhanced regulatory requirements, especially, like I said, if you're acting in the finance, banking, and healthcare space. And actually, this is the reason why we see many banking and healthcare organizations not fully embracing the cloud, not because they are old-fashioned and they don't want to move forward like everyone else. No, it's because of the complex compliance requirements which are imposed on them, because they are in a very highly regulated industry. They have to comply as well with those added compliance requirements, and in some cases that has actually prevented those organizations from fully moving towards a public cloud. Now, I'm not saying that if you are in the finance space, for example, that you cannot move towards the cloud. What I'm saying is that it is of course possible to still have a move towards the cloud, and a number of banks have actually been doing it. But then, if you do it, you have to make sure that you do have in place additional security controls to ensure that your compliance requirements are met. And those compliance requirements would depend, of course, on the local laws, the local laws in the country where you operate. Challenge number 5: cyber attacks. And this is something as well that we see a lot. We have seen a lot more recently over the past few months, where there have been an increase in the number of cyber attacks. And as you can imagine, whenever there is a cyber attack, the data loss and the damage to the reputation and the integrity of an organization has often been questioned because of that. And there are a number of different cyber security threats that can affect a company's cloud computing service. For example, a malware injection attack. For example, in this case, what the attackers do would be that they would try to inject malware into the cloud infrastructure to get access to information stored in the cloud. Distributed denial of service, where the attackers would flood the system with heavy traffic so that the servers are not able to cope with that heavy traffic, making the service, making the system shut down and making it unavailable to customers. Man-in-the-middle attack as well. That's when you have unauthorized users trying to manage, to position themselves between the conversation of two or more parties so that they can alter data. And you know, those different types of attacks have seen a surge recently because a lot of people are moving towards the cloud, and also because a lot of people are isolated, I would say, due to remote working, and isolated in the sense that they don't necessarily see it, that they can just turn around and ask a colleague, oh, what do you think about this, or whatever, because each one is in their own space. In some cases as well, it has led to a bit more carelessness, I would say, in terms of security practices. So those are the main challenges that I wanted to mention. And so what does it mean then? You know, what are the different solutions that we should implement to avoid those different challenges that I just mentioned? Well, I guess the first and the most important advice that I can give would be, whenever you choose a service provider, do conduct your own due diligence. Don't just rely entirely on the service provider and trusting that they would do everything that needs to be done to ensure the security of your data. You need to also make sure that, don't just rely on the name. Make sure that you enable the different settings, because those cloud providers, they have a wide range of customers, each with their own different security requirements, their own security compliance requirements, and this means that in many cases they would not be able to tailor the security features for each and every organization. So they're going to have default settings which work for most organizations, but then in many cases, depending on the sensitivity of the information that you are handling, depending on the jurisdictions, the countries in which you operate in, depending on the applicable laws which apply to you and so forth, well, you may have enhanced security requirements. And this means that you have to, of course, ensure that the vendor that you're using is reliable and reputable. So you have to conduct your due diligence, but then you also have to make sure as well that you don't just rely on whatever setting that the vendor just enables by default. You have to make sure that your security team actually takes the time and effort to check the different settings, to make sure that they turn on the right security settings for you. For example, encryption. This may be something which may not necessarily be enabled in all different settings, but then in many cases, this would be an extremely helpful security feature to have enabled, so that the data is encrypted not only during the data transfers between you and the cloud provider, but it's also enabled as well when the data is being stored on the cloud. The next point is data mapping. What I mean here is that in many cases, many organizations don't necessarily have the full picture as to what as to the data flows. They don't necessarily know, well, where each data element is being stored, where it's going, what are the data flows. And this is actually a big issue, not only from a security standpoint, but also from a regulatory and compliance standpoint, because you have a number of laws, the GDPR, so the European General Data Protection Regulation being one of those which immediately come to mind. They do actually require organizations to be able to demonstrate the processing activities that they conduct. And in order to be able to do that, you actually need to understand, well, what are your data flows? Where is the data being stored? Who has access to the data? is the data being shared with any third party and so forth. And this is an essential step. And in many cases as well, when you conduct this data mapping exercise, and when you work with the different teams, different business units to try to understand where the data is being stored, in many cases, we've seen that some organizations discovered that data was being stored on certain services without the IT or security team knowing it. And this is because, well, with the cloud, it has become so easy for virtually anyone to simply host data on the cloud. So maybe you want to share data with someone, so you just upload some files on Dropbox or whichever other hosting solution. Maybe you just decided, for your business team, maybe you're going to use a productivity tool where you can share data across different team members and so forth. And in some cases, there has been this phenomena where the IT team was not even aware that the business teams have been outsourcing the data storage to third-party vendors, and the business teams would have done that proactively out of their own initiative, because it's just literally just a few clicks in order to conduct this. And sometimes the business teams thought that this is the quickest solution, because if we involve IT, maybe it's going to take us a few days or a week or so in order to get it approved and done. Whereas if I do it myself, it's going to take just a couple of minutes. So they thought they were helping everyone by taking a quicker route, and they were thinking, well, there's no cost for the organization, so if it's free of charge, so why should the organization be concerned? But then, while it may not be an issue from a pure financial standpoint, it could be an issue from a security standpoint, because this also means that there is a lot of data which is potentially being stored outside of the organization without the IT and security teams being aware of it, and therefore without them being able to implement the various security controls which are needed. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that cloud adoption is something that we should be scared of, and that we should revert back to the old-fashioned way. This is not at all what I'm saying. On the contrary, I think that cloud adoption has a lot of major benefits, cost savings, increased agility. You can have scalability. So there are lots of benefits that the cloud can offer us. But then what's important is that we shouldn't only focus on the on those benefits, like everything in the business space. Well, once you realize that something has a lot of benefits and that it is a good option to go forward with, well, you also have to consider the risks which are attached to it. And just because there are risks doesn't mean that this is something to be avoided. No, everything has a risk. You simply need to understand how to either reduce the risk, or otherwise how to take into account the risk, so that you can act in such a way that the risk is being fully considered and managed. And traditionally, organizations had the ability to control how accessible the data is, who has access to the data in the data center. And while it was not a perfectly secure approach, it was certainly helpful, I would say, for the security teams to be able to have this tangible approach, once you, like I mentioned earlier, because it's something that you can see. Well, it's tangible, and therefore it can appear at least a bit easier to try to secure it. But then once you move to the cloud, it is something a bit more intangible. You don't see it, you don't have control to it, and it's being hosted and managed by a third-party vendor, and therefore, in many cases, some organizations have simply just ignored and overlooked security risks because they thought, well, you know, I don't have to worry about it. Somebody is doing it, but then this is not the right approach. A misconfiguration on the cloud service on your end, or otherwise, if you choose a cloud service provider that does not really have a good security approach, the most common means nowadays actually to be in the news for all the wrong reasons, to suffer a security incident and to experience sanctions and fines from a regulator. And therefore, you know, if there's anything that you should take away from the session, I would say that understanding the risk is actually crucial when making cloud adoption decisions. You know, again, I'm not saying that you should avoid the cloud, but then and the different risks, the different challenges that I've exposed in this session, you know, the reason why I went through each of them in detail is because those are really the key factors that organizations should consider so that they can try to reduce to the extent possible the risk element, or at the very least to make the risk factor acceptable for the organization. Yeah, you know, you don't want to stop the teams from using the cloud. This is certainly not something that we are advocating today. And you know, I would just end by saying that you know, there was this joke traditionally that you know, if you're bad at security in the data center, then it means that you will also be really bad at security in the cloud. And you know, this applies today. Just because you're shifting data from your data center to the cloud doesn't mean that you don't have any responsibility in terms of security. On the contrary, you know, if like people would say as well, garbage in, garbage out. And if you are not good at securing the data that you have on your own system, then you're still not going to be any good in the cloud. So that's about all I wanted to say. I don't know if there were any questions or anything